Rick, how did you find Carnivore?
Hi, Dave. Thanks. The question that you ask is an interesting one, and when I was thinking about it, because I've watched a lot of your videos, it's the way that it rings for me is why did I have to find carnivore? So when I was 5 years old, and this will be important later, but my father actually passed away, and he passed away of kidney and liver failure. And it was something that we didn't really talk about, but it was in the back of my mind for my whole life while growing up. And so, what happened, and I've seen a few of your guests talk about this as well, is that at about 11 years old, my family became Seven-Day Adventists. And so, from that period of time, our diet drastically changed. It went from, what I guess the standard diet was in the mid to late 80s, moving closer and closer to a vegetarian than vegan lifestyle. So when I was younger, I would say my diet was maybe chicken or fish once a week and with some eggs a little bit once a week. But over time, it changed. And for those viewers who don't know, the Seven-Day Adventists suggest they have a health based message, and that message speaks to the need to, I guess, live a vegetarian lifestyle for the most part, and possibly vegan. And so I lived that way for quite some time, and my mother became a little bit of a health nut, and I don't say that in a negative way, but she was always reading books and literature on how to be healthy, and that trended to a vegetarian way and a vegan way of living, and a lot of herbal medicines. And when I was a kid, and I didn't really understand this, but a lot of the people that she would be working with informally, family and friends, they would be getting sicker. I've seen a lot of people, a lot of friends who had lupus, MS, end up getting seriously ill, some dying, and then also a lot of her family had diabetes. And so I remember when I was about 14 years old that my grandmother passed away because of complications for diabetes. And my mother's sister as well ended up with diabetes as well. And it was a long term battle. And so as I'm sure you've heard with other people who've adopted a carnivore or keto way of eating, is that long term vegetarianism and veganism really does impact the body. So I started noticing late in my teens, 17, 18, 19, where I just wasn't coping really well. I had a lot of anxiety. I was struggling in school. I went to college initially, and it was a terrible time. I couldn't focus in class, and I fell into a really, really bad depression. And one of the things that happened that time, and I'm actually still dealing with, and it's quite personal. And this is one of the reasons why I'm not turning on my camera in this particular interview, and I apologize to the viewers who are unable to see me. But the depression was so bad that it led to self injury, and it was really impactful for my family at the time. And it honestly was like a wave of like fog and depression, and it just felt never ending. Anyway, long story short, I ended up moving out of my house at about 20, 22, and moving across the country. And I started my own life with my own family, and I kept in the education sense sphere, and did my work in social work. And one of the things that I saw is how they were feeding, and I did a stint in geriatric care, long term care. The things that they were feeding these older adults who were going through that later stage in their life, and just alarm bells were ringing. And my diet at that time, since I was away from home, and I transitioned away from Seven-Day Adventism at that same time, that my diet just became terrible. It was junk food, lots of carbs, and my health started going weird. And it was hard to understand because I moved away from home, didn't really have my mother's care there. And I do want to just take a moment to shout out that There are different ways of being, and I recognize if people attempt carnivore and struggle with it and do other things. But I will say I have seen some people react very well to other kinds of diets. But at that time in my life, it was really challenging to navigate, moving away from that very strict kosher-esque way of eating to just having the availability of anything that, came across my plate. So, um, dealing with the anxiety, food really was my solace. That's where it went to. But my health started to tank, and unbeknownst to me, with my mother being across the country because I moved quite far away, her health, because she stayed vegan, also started to tank. And so for me, what that meant, and I shared this with you earlier, but my weight ballooned. I was maybe at that time in my life, when in my 20s, I was about 200 pounds. Over time, it went all the way up to about 268, 270 at the most. And my mom ended up developing cancer. And so she continued to go for a whole foods diet, and her energy, her muscle mass, her everything started to just get worse and worse. And I had to end up going to the doctor because it was just this was just wild. And we did blood tests, and when they did the blood tests, my liver enzymes and my kidney enzymes were elevated, and they were elevated in the same way that they were elevated for my father when he passed away. And so my dad passed away when I was 5, but he was 50. And I was approaching at this time in my life about 35 years old. And so in the back of my head, I'm thinking, am I going to make it to 50 if my kidneys are already causing me problems? And um, I had high blood pressure. My vision was getting blurry. The doctor at that time was checking my A1C. And long story short, my A1C eventually got up to 6.8, which my doctor told me I had diabetes, and started prescribing a whole host of medications. And I decided to try that a little bit. I didn't really tolerate them well. And so I was navigating that, and there was an opportunity for me to take my mother in to my house. And she ended up getting very unwell. And we adjusted her diet, and I began to feed her some meat. And unfortunately, my mother's health took a turn for the worst. But when she was eating that new type of food, I could see almost like new life in her body. And it was such a weird thing to see. And so my mother unfortunately passed away, and that was really hard to deal with. But I bumped into someone who was living a carnivore lifestyle before I even knew what that was. And I regret to say that at the time I completely mocked him because I didn't understand what was happening. Like, we worked quite closely together, and every day he would eat a steak for lunch, and he would bring it in from home. It was cold, and he would just eat it and not really complain. And everyone around him would make jokes about why he was eating that way. But let me tell you, this was the fittest person I've ever seen in my life, and he was happy and had tons of energy. And I just doubted it, and I thought he's not going to be around for that long because that kind of eating is just bizarre and weird. So long story short, with the doctor coming to me and saying, you need to be on metformin and Ramipril and all these other kinds of drugs. And the thing that I noticed was all of the all of the documentation that came with it and the side effects that they noted were the things that they were trying to prevent for me. So it either led to diabetes, or it led to damaging her kidneys or something. And so I decided to not take my doctor's advice, and I wanted to do something about it because, again, in the past, even though my family went the vegan and herbal route, I did see some people curing long-standing issues to some degree with the food that they took. So I decided to explore what was out there, and I fell into keto. But keto actually did not land well for me at all. And what was really weird about it is when I started keto, I increased my veggies, like 10x that I normally would have. And I decided, this was in, I think, 2017, to do this kick. I lost a lot of weight, but inflammation was just rampant throughout my body. And I actually got trigger finger. And for those who don't know, trigger finger is where it's kind of arthritic, where your tendon in either your thumb or your fingers gets locked up and you can't move your hand. And it was unbelievably painful, to the point where I was going to get surgery to fix my hand. And at the last minute, the doctor decided to go with a cortisol shot to fix my hand. And thankfully it did. And I thought, wow, that's over. I'm good to go. Um, but the stress of that and the work that I was doing at the time, my diet went poor again. But this last time, in September, when my A1C was high, my liver enzymes were high, and it was really, really stressful, I said, you know what? I need to make my year 40, which was coming up last November, the best year of my life. And I really want to give this one more shot. Um, and I was there again battling with inflammation in my other thumb because how I was eating and what was going on. And my thought at the time was just add more veg, and you'll be fine and everything will work out. But then I decided to make a drastic change. So in November of last year, I got a gym membership and I thought, let me try to exercise my way out of this. And while there were some benefits in terms of, in terms of my cardiovascular health and some of the initial gains, it really wasn't enough. So in January of this year, I decided to start slow. And what that meant for me was an intermittent fasting window that everyone thought I was crazy. I said, I'm going to only eat 4 hours out of the day. So it's a 20 and 4 window, and my window is 4 to 8 p.m. And then I cut out all junk food, and I cut out all caffeine and all kinds of sugary drinks. And what that meant for me was, believe it or not, for the last 10 years, I probably was drinking, Rockstar energy drink, maybe 2 to 3 of those per day just to stay level. So that alone was a shock to my system. No caffeine, no sugar, no late night snacks, no garbage. And my weight started to go down. And so February was coming, and I thought to myself, it's only 28 days or 29 days. I can do this carnivore thing. It can't kill me. And so I told my family that I was going to do this weird thing, and just don't mind me. I'll be on the side here making my own meals. And the weight started to melt off, and not in a, I don't know if you're familiar with the show The Biggest Loser, or where people lose a lot of weight. And um, what tends to happen in some cases is there's loose skin and weird things that happen, I guess. Long story short, my body essentially just shrunk. So my feet felt smaller. I was fitting into shoes and I felt loose. I was a size 38, 40 in terms of my pants, and I'm now down to a 34. Um, my neck size, I never was able to button the top button of any button-up shirts, and those now fit. So long story short, the February month was a radical one for me, and I dropped a significant amount of weight. And ever since then, I've decided to stay extremely low carb, because one of the things that happened was the keto flu finally hit me when I tried carnivore. It was about 2 weeks in, and my body really needed a rest. And I really feel like it was decades and decades of my poor eating and, lack of protein, lack of good fats, and all the things that my body stored that it was trying to get out of the system. So I look back at a lot of my health concerns that I had and where carnivore has led me. And when I talk about it with some of my friends, the main theme is, oh, I've lost a lot of weight, but a lot of the health issues that I had that were very private to me are now gone. And they're gone in a way where I almost didn't even realize how big of a problem those things were. So I no longer have any kind of brain fog, whatsoever. Um, zero anxiety to the point where um, I would always just stay at home because I didn't want to hang out with anybody. I didn't want to be in the limelight. I was worried about what people were thinking or about me or what have you. My feet were swelling while this my weight was going up, and my the reason I went to the doctor and some of the other larger medical things going on with me. But every day I would have to put my feet up at the end of the day because you could push on them, and your fingerprint would stay in my foot for hours at a time. With that, I guess that's called edema. Um, I had some skin troubles with some eczema as well that were on my face and on my elbows. All of this just went away in the course of I want to say about 15, 20 days being strict carnivore. Um, and it's wild. I've never And this is the point where I actually decided to reach out to you because I watch a lot of your videos, and I bumped into some other videos on some other popular channels, both on Instagram and on YouTube, Dr. Shafi, and um, I think she's named like the Primal Bot or something on Instagram. And I was thinking about all the people and what they say about carnivore, and I realized for the first time in a very, very long time that I was actually happy. And not just happy that, I lost all this weight or happy that I was feeling better, but I was actually on its own just happy with no depression, no anxiety for the future or about myself or anything like that. And even with my mother who passed away and, my life story and all the people that I know that have been sick, I was able to look back on that and actually give that some peace. And so the reason I had to find carnivore, really, I I truly think it was to save my life in the sense that I was going down a path where food and sugar were my addictions, and it just got was getting to the point where I didn't know if I was going to be able to live as long as my father, or what would happen as a result to my family if something drastic happened to me. So that's kind of why I found carnivore.
Well, congratulations. That's that's an amazing story. Um, the first question I've got actually is just, what do your family think about this? It was just gonna be, "I'm just gonna do this weird thing for February," and it's like you've transformed yourself.
Yeah, and um, I think respectfully, I'll say that it's been very difficult, to be honest. And again, the reason is my wife. She teaches, and she's a biologist, so she's aware of, I guess, the general, common understanding of carbohydrates and LDL and cholesterol, and everything that carnivore does is speaks against that. So I think she was concerned initially from, like, where my body would go with this, and then also not following the doctor's advice so strictly in the sense of here's some medications to reduce your blood sugar and support your overall health. However, I think my wife has seen, the drastic change in my mood, my attitude, my ability to navigate stress, and just the level of health that I have now, and the things that I'm willing to do that I've never done before or would want to do. So that's been quite positive. But I will admit, having a different kind of meal than the rest of my family every night is stressful in terms of what that means for dinner time and what we used to have. Because I know a lot of families don't actually eat together all the time, but we do. And so, having the question of, like, why am I not eating what everyone else is eating, it's sometimes it causes a I don't care enough about other people kind of conversation because I'm taking care of myself. And so I think we're still navigating that conversation, but I think we both recognize that what I'm doing for me is actually adding value to my life and to the family, and putting me in a position where I'll be stronger for them and for myself.
Yeah, that kind of resonates with me. I maybe not to quite the same level as yours, but yeah, I had those kind of issues starting off, you know? where it felt a little bit like the message, the unspoken message was that, perhaps I didn't care enough,
Mm,
about sitting down for dinner with the family, that kind of thing. But ultimately, and I think this is what you were getting at, really, ultimately, you need to be able to fill your cup to have enough, for everyone else, right? You have to be healthy and, full of energy so that you can be the husband and father for everyone else, right?
yeah.
Mm.
And that I would say the interesting thing about that too is my wife is actually intolerant to soy. And so one of the things that I've had as a discussion point is I would never ask my wife to eat soy because I know what that does to her body. And so I've discovered, and this was one of the pieces again from Dr. Shafee's video, where he had that plants are trying to kill you video that I'm sure you've seen. And the moment he talked about oxalates that are in spinach, and I looked at the volume of spinach that I was eating in the past, and how those months where I tried these health kicks, you know, I'm talking mounds of spinach and mounds of kale. And I immediately was like, that's why my body is so inflamed and why it hurts so much. And as soon as I dropped that and gave my body a chance to heal and recover and frankly digest something that is easy for it to navigate, all of that went away. And aches and pains again that I never thought that I had, and just gone. Like my flexibility is off the charts, and I'm not, yoga-esque. I can't. I was never in that mode, but I can bend better. I can get out of bed earlier, and I feel like I honestly feel like I'm 18 years old again, and I'm 40 this year. Yeah.
Um, yeah, spinach has got a lot to answer for because it's, people have been led to believe that that is so good for you, and people eat mountains of that stuff, Not only spinach, Popeye's got a lot to answer for as well. He's done a lot of damage. Yeah. So, like, what is so you completely left the church?
Yeah, it's not related to the diet at all, but when we joined the Seventh-day Adventist Church, we didn't really take part in all of their beliefs. I'm not quite sure how we got associated with them, but at the time, again, I was 11 years old, and I stayed in the church for about 10-ish years. And for the most part, I will say it was a really great community. But to be honest about it, there's a lot that is not said publicly that's said behind closed doors in terms of its health message and some of its other ideas. And so I remember there was a family that went there, and they ate meat a lot. They were heavy into meats, and whenever we had a potluck or we were having a Bible study on, the proper diet or what have you, they were vilified and their opinions were cast down. And it didn't feel good at the time, but you're in that atmosphere and you think that you're doing the right thing, trying to say like, just look at this verse, and it really says that, for example, Daniel's story with Daniel and the lion's den, they ate the pulse and the leftover um, spinach or whatever they say that they had, and they were healthy as a result, and they rejected the king's meat and things like that. But it really kind of was an echo chamber where you had to believe what the leaders of the church would say, and how that aligned with the writings of Ellen G. White, who is their prophet. So, yeah, it was. And I would say that my mom probably didn't leave the church, but I did. So she stayed in it for quite some time. But about 20-ish years old, when I decided to move away from home, I did a really in deep, in-depth dive into what they believe, and there's other things that just came to light that I was not okay with. So I moved away.
Yeah. And really the reason I ask is like at the age you were, I guess you may have made some friends through the church, and I was just wondering if you kept in contact with anyone still from there.
Yeah, I so again, and maybe I didn't really mention this. I know my own story, and I recognize no one else does. But when my father passed away, I really got super connected with my mom. She became my kind of my rock, so to speak. And I was quite introverted, and so I didn't really extend myself out to other people my age. I really hung out with the elders of the church, so to speak. So all of my companions and friends there were, I would say, at the time, 40 to 60 years old. It's kind of weird thinking about that now, looking back, but a lot of my the people that I associated with were elders in the church, and we were heavy into discussing doctrine and things like that. So my only real interaction with the other kids were during they call it Sabbath school, where in the mornings you would hang out with kids of your own age and study the Bible at an appropriate level. And even at that time, still they would talk about the right things to eat, and how and maybe this is not quite known, but Seventh-day Adventists believe that you can lose your salvation at any given time. And that's slightly different than other Christian denominations that believe differently. And so when you talk about the health message, and you think, can I do something different? You're really thinking about the question of, should I do something that will jeopardize my salvation? And so it's a really it's a really big hook, in the sense of, when you hear messages from the church and some of the other leaders, you really feel that you need to follow it, and you can't take any other course. And so when I decided to move away, even to this day, some of the health message things that I learned back then are still with me, and I have trouble even trying to think about moving away and doing something different. So to this day, for example, I don't eat pork and I don't eat shellfish. And even if someone were to prepare it for me, I get this feeling that this is not right to do. And it fully stems from the belief system and how we were told, and sort of the guilt and the shame around what that would mean. So it's pretty in depth. And so I can completely co-sign everything that those who are Seventh-day Adventists who've been on your channel have said, in the sense of, like, when you have the Bible studies, at people's houses or late into the night on Saturdays, they really get into the weeds in terms of, here's what you have to believe to be saved at the end of the day.
Wow, that's yeah, it sounds like a pretty rough environment to be in, because it's almost like you're always looking over your shoulder. Can I do this? Can I?
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
wow. Okay, so to move on to, maybe you talked about eating this. To move on to slightly lighter matters, how are you eating day to day? How many meals are you eating, and what are they made up of?
Yeah. So in January this year, again, I mentioned that I did a 20 and 4 intermittent fasting window. And then in February, I just started straight carnivore. And I started with eating a lot of meat, just to make sure that I was full throughout the day. And I found that I couldn't do intermittent fasting anymore, because my body just craved at weird times. And so what I've been doing through the end of February and up to today is, in the morning I make a lot of eggs, and I didn't know you can eat this many eggs, really, until now. But again, when I was a kid, I would have like one egg a week, and I'm up to maybe 6 to 8 eggs a day. And that's what I do to carry through the afternoon, and what I do for work. And then in the evening, I'm either doing ground beef with some cheese, or a steak, just every day. And then that tides me over, and I'm full until the next day, and I feel really great.
Oh, nice. Um, and well, from that, you talked about a lot of the health benefits that you've had. Um, how? more specifically on those things, how is the A1C? It went from 6.8, and how are you doing now?
So it's continuing to fall, and it's something that I'm really happy about. And I'm going to try to share this on the screen. So let me see if I can cue this up. So hopefully this is coming through,
There we go.
and your viewers can see it. But um, in 2019, that's when my diet really started to tank, and that's about the time that my mother passed away. And then, as we know, in 2020 and on, there was what was happening with the world made it really hard to be healthy in terms of exercise and what we were eating. So I did a lot of stress eating over that time, and as you can see here, my A1C went up to 6.8, and I tried to manage it initially, but it wasn't going down fast enough, and so the doctor prescribed um, metformin and wanted to monitor my blood pressure. And I took it for a bit, and it made me really sick. And I just couldn't stomach it anymore, literally, and kind of figuratively as well, I guess. But from there, as you can see in January, late January, after I cut out a lot of junk food, a lot of carbs, and put in intermittent fasting, it's gone down. I also after this, use one of those blood glucose monitors that you can apply to the skin as well, because I wanted to see what was happening with just my eating overall. And so when I was eating carnivore, I know that it got into the low fives as well, just based on the averages of the app that I was using and the monitoring that I was doing. So overall, my A1C has been it's been better, and I feel like I can feel the difference because I have no more sugar crashes. I don't feel compelled to, eat something that would bump up either my energy level or add, a sugar fix so I can get through the day. So I'm feeling quite stable in terms of how I feel and based on the things that I'm eating.
Nice. That's awesome. And so I guess there's no going back from here.
I don't think so. I don't want to go back, to be totally honest. It's when I look back, it was a really scary time. Like I don't know if you've ever driven through fog before, like in real life with a weather incident, but that's what it felt like my life was like. And I wasn't slowing down. So my foot was on the
Mm.
pedal all the way to the floor, and life was really passing me by. And there were details that I wish I can go back and take more stock of. Um, my son, who's 11 years old now, there was a lot in his life that I feel like I've missed because I either had anxiety, didn't want to participate and attend something, or I couldn't concentrate and really didn't. Um, I wasn't in the moment as much as I think I thought I was at the time. And even in these last 2, 3 months of being on this, I've made a concerted effort to participate in his life more at almost like a different level. And the former me, I don't think that I could do anymore, and I don't want to. That being said, while I am eating eggs and steak, there are situations where I might break the diet very briefly just to, participate and make sure that, my son's life isn't impacted by what I'm doing or what have you. So I was actually traveling 2 weeks ago, and it was very hard to stick with a diet. And I made an effort to, recognize what I was doing, but also get back on it as soon as possible. So there may be moments in my life in the future where I decide to do something different, but this is going to be 90% what I do forever. And so I already made a commitment to myself for that month of February that, when my birthday comes up again, I'm going to have a piece of cake because I feel like I deserve it a little bit, but it's not going to be a regular thing at all. I, I I was with some friends, and they bumped into me that haven't seen me in a long time, and they were visibly shocked in terms of how I looked before and after. But they offered me an energy drink, and I'm like, I can't do this. It it honestly feels like what some people have said in terms of being an alcoholic and then being in a situation where they can't partake in the drink at all whatsoever. And I'm actually very thankful for that. And like speaking of the 7 Day Adventism for just a little bit, because of that experience that I had, I know what it's like to be in a room where I can't participate and do a certain thing, right? So situations where I couldn't go out on Saturdays because, that was a holy day, or I couldn't eat that meal because it had pork in it. And I'm not, I don't feel like I miss much when I believe that I'm doing the right thing. And this is more than a belief. It's a feeling. I've never felt this good ever in my life. So I don't want to do anything to jeopardize that in terms of what I consume.
So if you had someone, one of your friends came to you and said, "Wow, you're looking amazing. I want some of that. I want to get on this carnivore." What would you recommend they do so that they can have success?
That's an interesting question because I think everyone's path is different. So people have been asking me like what has changed, and I don't say that it's carnivore directly. I just say that I made a very big change in my life, and I'm trying to respect my body and listen to my body. And for me, what that means is I don't think that everyone's diet, if you eat the standard diet, there are things that affect me and they'll affect you differently. So you really have to experiment, right? So if someone wanted to improve their health or address a concern, I would say consider it like an elimination diet and begin eliminating some of the things that we know are not good for you. So seed oils, um, sugars, artificial sweeteners, and just assess how your body works without it. Perhaps even introduce it again and just see, did that impact me? And if it does, then maybe you shouldn't be having that thing. And I didn't mention this earlier, but one of the things that I never did was calorie count because I couldn't really do it. But I actually would say we should probably carb count and see how many carbs are we really eating per day. And if you reduce that by a certain percent and feel better, then that's an indication of what might be impacting your body. So whenever I talk to anyone about it, I always say, just look at what you're eating and try to think, how is that impacting you on a day-to-day basis? And take it one day at a time because it's hard. Like, again, I did keto, and the way I was doing keto with all like the like the almond flour and the keto snacks and the mounds and mounds of veggies, it did not work for me at all. And I'm sure there's people who operate on keto quite well, and I'm more than happy for those people. But at the end of the day, I don't think if I didn't see the Dr. Shafee video and think to myself, maybe it actually is the spinach, I would still be struggling with, trying to find a diet that's on the internet that someone says just to try. But yeah, just honest conversations with those who you trust and just let them know that it's okay to take control over your own diet and you don't have to follow, what either the American Food Guide or Canadian Food Guide or whatever is actually saying that, you should be eating just these things, or for lack of better words, everything except for meat.
Yeah, everything's okay in balance.
Yeah, that does not work for me. If you gave me a box of Oreo cookies and looked away, it would be gone. Can't balance. I can't balance cookies. That doesn't work.
See, the problem with that is you can break the box in half and then it's perfectly balanced, right? It doesn't mean it's going to be healthy for you, right?
Yeah.
Um, so Rick, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with us, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity, and again, thank you for all your interviews. I love watching them as they come out. I'm surprised you do as many as you do.